When Fernando Alonso left Formula 1 in 2018, it was at the end of one of the most frustrating periods of his career. He hadn't won a race in 5 years or stood on an F1 podium since 2014, and it seemed unlikely but not impossible that he would ever return to the sport. At the time, when asked if he could come back in the future, this is what he had to say. I don't think so. I think at that time, 2021, it will be a little bit too late. To have the energy to start back up and put full dedication and full commitment into something when you're 39 or 40 years old, it's going to be more difficult than now. I'm not planning that. But as we know, a lot can change in 3 years, and the 40-year-old Spaniard has just confirmed his plans to continue racing in 2022 with Alpine, and has proved so far this season to be the same motivated, fast-starting and hard-defending Fernando Alonso that we all know and love, or love to hate depending on your opinion of him. So what changed in his time away from the sport, and how has the 2021 version of Alonso reignited his passion for F1? To start with, we're going to take a look at how he fell out of love with Formula 1 in the first place. Alonso's frustrations with Formula 1 had started to show long before he departed McLaren for the second time in 2018. It's a story arc that seems to span all the way back to his championship wins in 2005 and 2006. At that time, he'd just become the youngest Formula 1 champion in history and had been the one to dethrone the mighty Schumacher and Ferrari combination. Alonso looked certain for more success in the future, and many even tipped him to go on and break Schumacher's record of 7 world championships. However, from there, Alonso's career is filled with false dawns, bad decisions and self-sabotage. Whether it was the bitter fallout with McLaren in 2007 or his ill-fated return to Renault in 2008, controversy seemed to follow the Spaniard wherever he went. When he joined Ferrari in 2010, it seemed like a fresh start. Alonso enjoyed some of the best moments of his career with Ferrari, not least the 2012 season where he dragged an uncompetitive car into the championship fight and fought down to the final race of the season, only losing out to Sebastian Vettel in the chaotic race in Brazil. But that also went sour after 2 failed title bids and what Alonso viewed as the team's failure to compete with the dominant Red Bulls from 2010 to 2013, and then the even more dominant Mercedes in 2014. And it was during these spells at McLaren and Ferrari that he gained his reputation for being difficult to work with and a political player backstage in these teams. This made it even more shocking when Alonso joined forces with Ron Dennis again in 2015, returning to McLaren as they partnered with Honda for the first time since their dominant days in the early 90s. For Alonso, this decision proved to be an even bigger false dawn than the earlier ones in his career. The McLaren and Honda partnership evoked memories of Senna and Prost dominating in the late 1980s, but ended without a single podium and a best result of 5th place. Quote from Alonso's teammate at the time, Jenson Button, sums up the expectation versus what we knew became a reality in the end. At the start of the season that year, he said, "We are not going to have a race-winning car at the first race, but we might have one at the last race." They didn't, and Alonso complaining about the car and engine became a feature every Sunday afternoon, including infamously calling the Honda engine a GP2 engine in their home race at Suzuka. What made things worse for Alonso that year was that Ferrari brought out a car much stronger than the one that he had been driving in 2014. Sebastian Vettel won his first race for the Scuderia in Malaysia just 2 races after Alonso had left. The relationship with Honda only got worse, and McLaren ended up switching to Renault powertrains by 2018. This gave Alonso one last false dawn with his cry of "and now we can fight again," finishing 5th in the season opener in Australia. Not only did this turn out to be the high point of McLaren's season, but the Honda engine for that year proved to be a huge improvement over the previous seasons. Gasly's 4th place in Bahrain in the Honda-powered Toro Rosso proved better than any result McLaren could manage that season. Red Bull were then so impressed with the Honda engine that they took them on as an engine partner and became a race-winning partnership the following season, and the rest, as they say, is history. Alonso finished the 28 season in 11th place in the championship, and he decided to leave the sport altogether, having not stood on a podium since Hungary 2014. He explained that he'd achieved all he wanted to achieve in Formula 1 and he wanted to try something new, and lastly that his frustration was with the direction that Formula 1 took with the new hybrid regulations in 2014. In a 2018 interview, this is what he had to say: "The rule change went in the wrong direction because now the teams have very little room to play and use creativity into strategies or anything like that. In a way, it helped the less talented people." Oof. Like all drivers, Alonso loves winning, but what he loves most is competition, and in those McLaren years he wasn't even able to compete. There has never been a question over Alonso's speed or his ability, something he was keen to point out wherever he could. When a driver of his quality is struggling to get out of the first part of qualifying, there's only so long that they're going to put up with that. So after years of bad timing and questionable career moves and false dawns, one of F1's most committed and divisive competitors fell out of love with the sport and left to try his hand at something else. Alonso focused his time away from Formula 1 in some of motorsport's other historic races. Having already won the Monaco Grand Prix, he turned his attention to completing motorsport's triple crown by winning the Indy 500 and the Le Mans 24 Hours. He was able to complete the latter twice by winning the historic endurance race for Toyota in 2018 and 2019, as well as the overall World Endurance Championship in dominant fashion. His Indy 500 efforts were less successful. After impressing and leading the race in 2017, his 2019 attempt was a disaster. He suffered multiple car issues, crashed in practice, and then he failed to qualify for the race altogether. 2020 wasn't that much better. Although he did qualify, he finished 21st and never really looked like challenging for the win. He also did some sports car racing in the US, taking part and winning the 24 Hours of Daytona in the IMSA series. Also tried his hand at the Dakar Rally and performed well until he crashed late on, which cost him several hours, ending up finishing 13th place in the standings. Alonso's time away from Formula 1 was a mixed bag in terms of success. Yes, he'd managed to win Le Mans, but the Triple Crown still eluded him and is something he's going to have to come back to later in his career. But the excursion in general seems to have been an important and fulfilling step in his eventual return to F1. Just like Kimi Räikkönen before him, the time away from Formula 1 gave Alonso the motivation and breathing space to return to the sport in a better state of mind. And when the opportunity did arise to come back, he grabbed it with both hands. Team Enstone had a Daniel Ricciardo-shaped gap to fill in their squad, and the pandemic had halted many other forms of motorsport while the F1 circus rolled on. Alonso reflected on his time away and his return to F1 by saying, "All those things have helped me to liberate my mind from the desires I have, and F1 is still in a time where there is no great competition. I thought this was a good time to do the things I wanted to do and then return with the new regulations. I did them, and now it's time to return. I love to have a racing car in my hands every 2 weeks." Alonso's return was made official in July 2020, and his F1 exile was officially over. When Renault announced that Alonso would return for 2021, there were lots of obvious questions. Would he still be competitive? Would he be difficult behind the scenes? Would he be complaining publicly over the radio if things didn't go well? Alonso himself described his return to F1 as a return home, and before the first race of the season in Bahrain, this is what he had to say. "I've always been considered the F1 guy in different paddocks. When I was in Le Mans, I was the F1 guy. When I was in Dakar, I was the F1 guy. And now that I'm back in F1, it's like I'm home in a way." He also spoke about wanting to test himself at this level again, a far cry from the man who doubted he'd have the energy to return when he left in 2018. He elaborated about how much he loved being back in an F1 car. "I think, honestly, the amount of joy and the amount of excitement is probably higher than what I anticipated. I'm really enjoying every lap out there, and I'm enjoying the preparation. I'm enjoying the things that before were the worst part of the weekend." It's been clear that this is a different version of Alonso than the one that left. This positive mindset has been consistent with throughout the season so far, even when he was getting up to speed in the first few races. We've also heard from Esteban Ocon after his win in Hungary that the two have a positive relationship behind the scenes, which hasn't always been the case with Alonso's teammates. There was genuine joy from Alonso to see his young teammate take the win in Hungary, as well as pleasure in his own role at securing that win. It was a bit of a slow start, with Ocon getting the better of Alonso in the opening rounds, but there were no angsty radio messages like we saw in the McLaren days, and we've now started to see Alonso return to his best form. Final restart in Baku was classic Alonso, who picked off several cars on the way to finishing 6th. More points followed in France and Austria before another mega start in Silverstone helped him on the way to a strong 7th, and then came Hungary and his brilliantly combative defence of Lewis Hamilton, which ultimately secured Ocon's maiden win. It was proof that the old Alonso was back, and he swiftly signed up for more action in 2022. Ultimately, it wasn't a huge surprise that Alonso decided to stay with Alpine for 2022. He said all along that he was returning for the regulation change that was originally planned for 2021 and then delayed a year until 2022. He wanted to come back this year to warm himself up to the sport again, get used to the team and learn more about the 2022 regulations. And make no mistake about it, although we've seen Alonso positive and calm and content this season, he is back here to do more than just make up the numbers. And in theory, the 2022 rules rules should suit Alonso and Alpine. 2022 cars should be racier than the current ones, allowing the drivers to make more of a difference, and Alonso's combination of pace, racecraft and experience could be a serious threat to the usual top teams. Alpine are also one of the teams better equipped to deal with the cost cap, having traditionally run a lower budget than Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari in the past. In their Lotus days, for example, they produce strong cars without the same spend as the others. But the real question is, will the Alonso of old rear its head if things don't go Alpine's way in 2022? I'd like to think that this new version of Alonso is here to stay no matter what happens, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. But if they are competitive next year, it would ultimately be quite fitting that Alonso did finally take a third world championship, because he returned home to the team that brought him his first 2 titles all those years ago. But whether you love him or you hate him, it's hard to dispute that Formula 1 is a better and more entertaining place with Fernando Alonso in it. Let me know what you've made of Alonso's return to Formula 1 and how you rate his and Alpine's chances for 2022 in the comments. Thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. We're a brand new channel, so any subscribes and any comments really do mean the world to us.